Here we go, boys. UFC 305. The middleweight championship of the world is on the line. Dricus Du Plessis taking on Israel Adesanya. There's definitely some bad blood backing this matchup here. At least I believe so. I don't care if things start to simmer down going into this fight. I remember what took place in the cage. You remember how worked up Israel Adesanya was about some choice words from Dricus Du Plessis. I'm not going to dive too much into that. I just feel there's a lot on the line when it comes to this fight. It's not just the championship of the world that's on the line. There's a lot to this fight. Dricus Du Plessis has been looking stellar in the cage. Whether or not you thought that he defeated Sean Strickland, there's no question that he looked very good in that fight, and he has elevated his fight game to a whole nother level. It was a very close fight. Now, Israel Adesanya comes off that disappointing performance against Sean Strickland, which was one of the more questionable performances that we've seen from Israel Adesanya. So I'm very eager to see how he bounces back here. Okay, guys, we're going to jump into this entire card. We're going to start at the bottom, work our way up towards the top. We'll have timestamps if you want to jump to any specific fight. Please, 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 guys, smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I got all types of MMA content coming your guys' way. And I have a question for you. Do you think this UFC 305 card is more stacked than the UFC 306 card? Okay, I'm not going to pull up UFC 306. Do your own due diligence there. If you guys already don't know a lot of the fights that have been announced, we have the headliner of Sean O'Malley taking on Merab Dvalishvili. But other than that, I feel that UFC 306 at the Sphere is pretty shallow. I think that this is a little bit of a deeper card top to bottom, and I'm very excited for the main event fight too. So I'm kind of leaning towards UFC 305, but I'm curious what your guys' thoughts on that are. We will have the fight companion going for UFC 305 without a doubt. So please join me for the main card for this event. I'll be live here on YouTube, and I would love to have you guys come hang out with me. As always, I will have a lot of content coming your guys' way fight week. So make sure you're following me on Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to work with me for my official plays that I will be targeting for this card, do not hesitate to reach out to me, because we are going to be locked in for this card, and we have been very hot with our bets over the last couple of months. So don't miss out there. Shoot me an email or message me on Instagram or Twitter. And before we jump into the first fight, just note we are powered by BETUS. Sign up through the link in the description of this video. Get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. No other sports books are matching you guys on your deposits like BETUS. So sign up through that description and let me know once you do that. This way I can send you guys over an additional gift. All right, guys, let's go jump into the first fight.
The teller.
Boy, this UFC's flyweight division just continues to get deeper and deeper. You can add another name to the list of promising young prospects in this division that have the potential to not only work their way into the top 15 as far as the rankings go, but maybe even make a run at the title one day. This dude, Stewart Nicoll, looks very promising on tape. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from him. He is 29 years old. He's not that young compared to the amount of pro experience he has. He's 8-0, undefeated, and he's looking really good on tape, though, man. This dude is a bully in there. Jesus Aguilar will welcome him to the UFC. Aguilar is a step up in competition for Stewie, so I'm excited to see how he performs, but I mean, all the tape that I pull up on him, I mean, he is just hitting on all cylinders. He goes in there, he bullies his opposition. Typically, he's getting them down to the mat and kind of grounding, pounding them. But everything that we've seen from Stewart thus far, he's just going in there and just typically ground and pounding his opposition, taking them down to the mat, pushing them up against the cage and just smashing them out. Has a couple submission victories under his belt as well. On the feet, I think that he's developing and he looks pretty good there. He gives me some Alexander Volkanovski vibes, okay? Stick with me. I know some of you guys may say, hey, pump the brakes, but he just moves very confidently. He gauges distance very well. He has good power. He's very physically strong. If you guys know what I'm talking about, when you watch Volkanovski in the cage, he's not necessarily the most flashy fighter, if you will. I mean, don't get me wrong, he has some flash to him, but he just does something well when he's in there. He's uber confident, and it's like he knows that he's the hammer and the fighter that he's facing is going to be the nail. And that's the vibes I get from Stewart Nicoll here, man. This dude moves well. I expect the recent success that he's had on the regional scene to translate right into the octagon. This was his last fight here, where he actually handed the fighter that he faced there his first ever L. He was undefeated, the Japanese prospect there. Got him to the mat, flattened him out, and ground and pounded him. That's something that we've seen him do before. And I think that he has potential to have a lot of success in this fight down on the mat. Jesus Aguilar, He does some things well. He has good power in his hands. He'll throw some clubbing type of strikes there. And if you're slacking and if you leave your chin up, he can put you out, as we saw in that Ross fight. But Stewart Nicoll is not Shannon Ross. And defensively, he's more sound. Also, he'll be able to eat those types of strikes more so and let the fight play out longer, where I do expect Stewart Nicoll to be a step ahead. And in those grappling exchanges, where we've seen Aguilar on his back a little bit. Even if you go to his regional tape, we've seen him on his back a little bit in some of his fights. He's not a bad grappler, but I think Stewart can get him down to the mat and get the better of him there. One thing that he will have to watch out for is if he's not on his P's and Q's. Yes, we know that Aguilar has a nasty guillotine choke. So I don't want to see Stewart Nicoll sticking his head in between his arms there and get caught up in a guillotine. That's something that I'm very familiar with. And if fighters are slacking there, they can be caught by a fighter like Aguilar, because Aguilar has a nasty guillotine choke. In fact, you take a look at his 10 victories. He's had quite a few guillotine chokes. He had a guillotine submission on Dana White's Contender Series, had a couple on the regional scene over Jamie Alvarez. That's a fight that's on YouTube, pulled off that second round guillotine choke. So just take note of that guillotine. I think that Aguilar has one of the better guillotine chokes in this division, but I don't see Nicoll slipping on a banana peel and making a mistake like that. I think that he will be ahead of Aguilar as this fight progresses, even if it takes place on the feet standing. Aguilar has some power like we talked about and whatnot, but Stewart will be the fighter that's hammering the leg kicks. I think he moves a little bit more fluidly and will actually have more success with his hands as well. So let's just cut to the chase here. I think that Stewart Nicoll has success in his UFC debut, and I have high hopes for how far he can push himself in this division. So yeah, I think he definitely passes the Jesus Aguilar test. Let's take a look at the betting line here. Interesting line movement. Okay, he opened up as a minus 155 favorite right off the rip from August 2nd all the way to August 9th, just about a week of time that we've got to see this line marinate as I'm recording this. And we've seen massive movement already from minus 155 all the way to minus 215 is now Stewart Nicoll. He's a big favorite. And I would expect that line continues to move in that direction. I could see Stewart Nicoll walking into the cage as like a minus 260 to a minus, potentially even a minus 300 favorite. I really feel the more people dive into what he's about, they're going to feel that he is just a step above and he's going to go out there and get the job done. Do I think that he gets a finish in this fight? We've seen Jesus Aguilar struggle a little bit with his grappling, right? When he's losing fights, he's getting submitted, right? He's got caught in that armbar by Tyra, as we talked about. He also took an earlier submission loss where he was caught against Gabriel Valdez. That was in the first round, got caught in a rear naked choke. So we've seen some issues with his grappling there. And I'm going to say that Stewart Nicoll has success with his grappling, but he may not even find that sub. I think that he may put Jesus Aguilar in a vulnerable position where he can do what he does best, and that's to posture up and start teeing off on him and set up a TKO. I really believe there's that type of potential. Now, maybe he hurts Jesus Aguilar down in the mat enough where Aguilar kind of gives up his neck and he gets caught in a rear naked choke. But I'm going to say simply that Stewart Nicoll has success down on the mat and eventually finds a finish. And I'm going to say it happens in the second round. So give me Stewart Nicoll to pass this test here in his UFC debut against a tough Jesus Aguilar and to get the job done and to be a fighter that we are watching in some big fights down the line. This dude's the real deal, man. I'm telling you, go check him out. Go break some tape down on him. He's a fun fighter to watch. Song Kenan is coming down to the lightweight division as he's been fighting in the welterweight division for some time. He's taken on Ricky Glenn. Ricky Glenn, a fighter that's been around the block for a long time. For all you long-time fight fans, for you hardcore fans, we know Ricky Glenn, Ricky the Gladiator Glenn from way back in the day. His most notable performance, one I always bring up when we're talking about Ricky Glenn, because it was just a fight that really sticks in your memory, was the damage that he put on poor old Gavin Tucker. That was a fight that should have been stopped very early on, and unfortunately for Tucker, it went all the way to the final bell there. He was out on his feet from the very beginning. He was hurt and damaged, and Ricky Glenn has the type of fighting style where he can really push the pace on you and just damage you up. Doesn't necessarily have the best one shot finish type of power, but he has good cardio. He's a crafty veteran, and he's had a lot of up and down performances. That's the one thing I will say for Ricky Glenn. You never really know what version you're getting from him. As of recently, though, I would say I'm a little bit down on Ricky Glenn. He's getting up there in age. It's hard for me to forget that he lost a decision to Kevin Aguilar, who I'm not that high on. I know he bounced back with the knockout victory over Joaquim Silva, who's a good athlete and whatnot. And he had that nice comeback against Grant Dawson where he was down in the scorecards but had a huge finish that fight, pushed to a draw. But then look at his last two fights. He gets knocked out in the first round in both of those against Christos Giagos and Drew Dober. So I'm a little down on him for the fact that he's now 35 years old. He's getting finished up very early in his fights. And Song Kenan is a fighter that can finish you there. He throws damaging shots on the feet and can look to finish you up there. I kind of favor that being the scenario here. Song Kenan has struggled defensively on the feet, but since some of those knockout losses that he's taken, getting finished by Max Griffin, which was a devastating knockout loss, and then Io Machado Gary, who we know is a good fighter, he goes to 2 decision fights, defeated Rolando Bedoya, and then he lost to Kevin Jousset, who's a good fighter. Didn't get finished by Kevin. I think that's something that he can kind of hold his head up for, not getting finished by a high-level fighter there. Kevin probably goes out there and finishes Ricky Glenn from what I've been seeing from him recently. So I think that Song Kenan is moving a little bit better in there right now, even though both fighters are getting up there in age. Song is 34 years old. He's hitting his mid-30s as well, but seems to have a little bit more left to give the fight game. Both these fighters have a lot of pro experience, as you see, almost mirror images on their resumes, 22-8 versus 21-8. But I don't know, maybe it's because I've been following Ricky Glenn from a long time ago. I feel like he has more mileage on him. And again, circling back to the recent performances, I will side with Song Kenan to win this fight. I just have to. Breaking down that recent tape on Ricky Glenn, I just can't trust him to survive any of the damage that's thrown his way. I'm going to say that Song Kenan actually gets a finish in this fight as well. I'm going to say he gets an early finish, first or second round knockout. In fact, I'll favor a first round knockout. I think these guys will clash in the middle of the cage very early on, and I just don't have a lot of faith that Ricky Glenn can bounce back here. If you want to play devil's advocate, we talked about the fact that Ricky Glenn has these up and down performances. Maybe he's very motivated for this fight and he shows up and he can land a damaging shot on Song, which Song, like we said, he has eaten shots as well. But listen, the betting line is set right now on Song. He's a minus 225. He's a big favorite, okay? I am not in favor of that betting line. I don't have enough faith in Song Kenan to go out there and get the job done at a minus 225 line. That's way too high for my liking. And I think the value is on Ricky Glenn. Do I necessarily want to bank on him at plus 185? Do I find there's enough value there? I'd rather just stay away. I think that this is just one of those fights where you kind of sit back and watch and something exciting will happen one way or another, but I don't really want to be dabbling with it. But at the end of the day, my professional advice to you guys is the value is on Ricky Glenn if you have to target this fight, or if you could find a bargain line on an under or a Song Kenan knockout victory, something like that. If you want to take a specific method of victory, that's where you're kind of hunting for your value. I don't recommend you guys are hammering a minus 225 money line on Song. We got another very young and bright prospect coming out of Australia here to talk about in Tom Nolan. Earlier, we talked about Stewie. I mean, Australia really has a lot to look forward to in the fight game. Tom Nolan, I think he's the real deal. Just 24 years old. He's taking on Alex Reyes here. These fighters at polar opposite points of their career. Tom Nolan, we do have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the performance he had in his UFC debut where he was knocked out against the underrated and dangerous Nicholas Mota. I think that was a great learning lesson for him. You gotta love the way he bounced back in his next fight over Victor Martinez. We cashed in on that. We had him in a 2-team parlay on that card. He went out there, finished Victor Martinez in the first round, showing that he is, without a doubt, a very dangerous fighter. When Tom Nolan's going out there and getting the job done, he's finishing you, right? He's never, he has 2 decision victories, but 5 of his 7 victories are knockouts. Had a big performance on Dana White's Contender Series, besides just his last fight. And then on the other hand, you have Alex Reyes, who's 37 years old. He was coming into his last fight off a crazy hiatus from the fight game. He was going on a coming into that Charlie Campbell fight on a 6-year hiatus from the sport. Props to him for looking to make a return, and props to him even coming off that knockout loss and looking to step in there once again against a young and hungry fighter like Tom Nolan. This will be his last chance if he loses. If he loses, he will be cut by the UFC and most likely will retire at the age that he's at. He's coming off 2 knockout losses, though. Even though they're so spaced out, his last 2 fights, he was finished in the first round. One was by Mike Perry, one by Charlie Campbell, who's not a bad fighter. Tom Nolan is going to be very live to go in there and hand him his third consecutive knockout loss. In fact, that's how I see this fight going. I just think that Tom Nolan is just going to be the younger, sharper fighter. He's going to have that length advantage. He's just a scrappy dude. But here's the thing. When we're talking about this fight, I mean, what's the point of talking about this fight without diving into the betting line? Because Tom Nolan is the biggest favorite on this card. He's a minus 1,000 on BETUS, okay? He's a huge favorite. Is that line warranted? I don't think so. I don't think that you should be targeting to do anything with that. You guys know what I'm going to say. You have to look if you can get a bargain on some type of knockout or under as far as this fight goes, because how can you forget that UFC debut fight that Tom Nolan had just two fights ago, the fight before his last? If Alex Perez can go out there and clip him with the shot, an ugly shot, and wobble him up and finish him, I mean, boom, your parlay is spoiled, or a crazy amount of money that you had to chalk up to win nothing is spoiled. Why would you even do anything with that? You have to try to get a bargain line on Tom Nolan to get a finish in this fight. I mean, realistically, you got to just kind of sit back. I know you guys don't want to hear this, but what are you going to do? You got to kind of sit back and just enjoy watching Tom Nolan perform once again, and or stay tuned for the prop edition video for this fight card, which we 100% will have out. Oh, guys, I promise you guys, I know I haven't been doing them for every card because we've been putting out different content, Dana White's Contender Series and all that, but I will for sure have a prop edition for this card, and we'll see what kind of lines we could hunt on this this sniper, Tom Nolan. But all in all, let's just cut to the chase here. I think Tom Nolan will get Alex Reyes out of there. He will now have 3 consecutive knockout losses. And I just want to note one other thing, though, too. Alex Reyes is a fight finisher, and that's what you have to worry about, because it's not that he's going to beat Tom Nolan tit for tat for 15 minutes. It's if he could find that one solution to shake things up and get a finish on Tom Nolan, which it being the knockout. All right, he has his fair share of subs, but I think he has to club Tom Nolan, because Tom Nolan has some nasty jiu-jitsu as well. He's a well-rounded fighter. And but give me Tom Nolan to really get his career rolling now and have 2 consecutive victories in the UFC, both via finish. Give me Tom Nolan to get a knockout in the first round. Your boy, Jack Jenkins, is taking on Herbert Burns, the brother of Gilbert Burns. Fight is taking place in the featherweight division. Herbert Burns, I've seen a lot of you guys going in on him online leading up to this fight. For whatever reason, maybe it has something to do with the fact that he lost 3 fights in a row, all via finish. But don't forget, he came into the UFC blazing hot. Besides the first round submission victory that he had on Dana White's Contender Series over Derek Minner, he was putting in work over at Titan FC, submitting guys over there. Then he came into the official octagon and he got 2 first round finishes over respectable opposition. Nate Landwehr is very tough. Evan Dunham was at the tail end of his career, but almost a legend in his own right was Evan Dunham. All you hardcore fans know what I'm talking about there. And then to the eventual 3-fight losing skid. The issue is that he's up there in age. He's 36 years old and he's looking flaky. He doesn't really like to take a lot of damage. He kind of fizzles out when you press him. And I could see Jack Jenkins really putting it on him. Jack Jenkins is a very tough fighter. He's coming off a loss, but it was a loss where there's an asterisk next to it. And I'll be the first to admit it, even though I had an official play on Chippy Mariscal there. That was a great event for us. I caught Chippy at underdog odds and we cashed. You got to give Chippy some credit though, right? He's a black belt in judo, and that was a little bit of a scramble position that set up that injury. I mean, he was putting in some defensive tactic, trying to stuff the takedown, and it did set up that injury on Jack Jenkins. So you got to give him a little bit of credit there as well. But we would have liked that to see how that fight actually played out. Before that though, maybe it was a little bit of karma, because Jack Jenkins did not deserve to get the nod over Jamal Emmers. I don't care what you guys say. I actually had a bet locked in on Jack Jenkins for that fight at underdog odds, okay? So I cashed in. I made money on that fight, and I'm just being honest with you. That fight should have not gone his way. But he did show that he's tough even in that fight, right? He constantly pressures. He's a very aggressive fighter. He could take a shot. Heavy leg kicks come from him. I think that he's going to throw a lot of damaging strikes, a lot of physically imposing type of strikes on Burns. I don't think that Burns is going to want to have anything to do with that type of fight. And I think that Burns is going to look for a way out. Early on, Burns will try to look for a slick counter strike, or he'll try to set up some type of a slick submission. We know that he's a very high caliber BJJ player. But Jack Jenkins is getting better and better as a fighter. He's been submitted twice earlier on in his career, and he's really fine-tune his grappling. I mean, those submission losses came back in 2017 and 2018. We're talking about 6-7 years ago. Since then, he's just going in there and he's putting in work in the cage. And yes, we do need to see him tested more. But even though I thought he lost that Jamal Emmers fight, he did keep it close. Technically, he won the fight. And Jamal Emmers is a high-level fighter. Jamal Emmers does a lot of things better than even Herbert Burns does, and I think that Jack Jenkins will be fine here. If you have any question marks in regards to Jack Jenkins, maybe it's coming off the injury. Is he all healed up, and is there any setbacks in the cage with his arm or something like that? I'm not banking on that, though. Not worried about the 5.5 inch reach advantage that Herbert Burns has here as well. I think that Jenkins will work his way to the inside, and he will impose his will on Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns should be finished 4 times in a row. Burns also takes this fight on short notice. That's something you have to keep an eye on as well. And this should be the end of the road for Herbert Burns, unfortunately for him. But maybe he could pull a trick out of his sleeve there and work some wizardry with the jiu-jitsu. Maybe something happens where he snatches it back in a scramble. That's what you're keeping an eye on. But I'm not overly concerned with that. I think that Jack Jenkins goes in there and gets a finish, most importantly. Doesn't just win the fight, because he's a huge favorite. Right now, he's a minus 550 on BetUS. He's the second biggest favorite on this card. This is another fight that we kind of have to peek at in regards to a KO prop, a finishing prop for Jack Jenkins or an under. That we got to take a peek at that in that video, because he's a huge favorite right now, and not necessarily sitting here telling you guys to parlay Jack Jenkins at minus 550. You guys know that's not really my style. It needs to be a little bit lower for us to target those types of 2-team parlays and whatnot. I don't think that line is going to come down either. So got to be looking towards a finish, a specific method of victory bet on Jenkins or an under there. Jenkins should find that finish. We head over to the women's flyweight division, where Casey O'Neill, who's currently ranked 15th, is very hungry to get her hand raised. She's coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing skid. She was just finished in her last fight against Ariane Lipsky. She's taking on Luana Santos, the judo black belt, who's just 24 years old and has been looking pretty good in the cage and looking pretty good outside the cage, if you ask me. She has some good dancing skills. If she goes out here and gets a victory, you can expect to see her shaking it up in the octagon. I would say this is a good matchup for her here, based on the fact that Casey O'Neill is an overrated fighter. And you guys know I've been saying that for quite some time. I think it has something to do with the fact that she was undefeated before her last 2 fights, so it kind of looked nice. I think she was 8-0 at the time or something like that. People kind of liked the way that looked. She had some impressive performances or dominating performances, but take a look at the level of competition that she was going in there and defeating as she kicked off her UFC career. Lara Procopio, Shayna Dobson. Shout out to Shayna Dobson. I shouldn't throw any shade towards her way. She follows me on IG. She's DM'd me, actually, Shayna Dobson. She's a cool chick, but she's not in the UFC anymore. But the Lara Procopio, the Antonina Shevchenko victory. Shevchenko showed to be a very one-dimensional fighter over time. Roxanne Modafferi, tough cookie there, but an older fighter who was coming out to the cage in her rocker, in her I don't even know if that's the right way to explain her situation. She had something going on, man. She was stiff and robotic. She was tough, but I mean, come on, if you really showed up on your P's and Q's, you went out there and you defeated Roxanne Modafferi, unless your name was Macy Barber. But Barber did get hurt in the fight. So but since then she loses to Jennifer Maia and Ariane Lipsky, which were a clear step up in competition. But it's not just that she lost to those women. It's the way that she looks. I think that she has some holes in her game. I just don't think that she's as good as a lot of you guys were saying she was. Her striking is, she has some grappling skills. I don't know. Nothing really stands out to me with Casey O'Neill. Does she have potential to put it together over time? Yes. She's just 26 years old. I know she's willing to travel the world to train with some of the best and to look to elevate her game to another level. She's willing to put in that work and sacrifice in that sense. But I still have to base who Casey O'Neill is off what I see from her in the octagon as of recently. And I'm not even saying that I'm really high on what I've seen from Luana Santos, but she does some things well. I think that first and foremost, her clinch game, the strength of her clinch game with those judo skills and how she controls girls up against the cage, that is something that she really brings to the table, and I could see her dominating those types of positions in this fight. I see her being the aggressor, pushing Casey O'Neill up against the cage where she could try to land some knees and some elbows there. And when it goes down to the mat, I think that she'll be just fine there as well. I think that she could potentially pull off a tricky submission, maybe. Not banking on that, but if we did see a sub in this fight, I think that it would be from Luana Santos, maybe slipping in another armbar as Casey O'Neill just comes off an armbar submission loss. So keep that in mind. And at range, I'm not really too high with either woman. Both of them are developing their striking, but I think that Luana Santos can hold her own there as well. All in all, I'm going to say Luana Santos does enough to win a decision victory over Casey O'Neill. Now, this is an interesting line. Luana Santos, who takes this fight on short notice. Casey O'Neill was supposed to be taking on Bleda. Bleda is a young, talented, up-and-coming fighter, a very physically imposing fighter, Teresa Bleda, who came off Dana White's Contender Series. Luana Santos takes this fight on short notice. She opened up as a minus 165, and she's now a minus 140 on BetUS. I like that line movement. I'm not overly concerned with her taking this fight on short notice. She's young. She's active in the gym. I think that we should still see the real Luana Santos here. I don't think that we'll see any impaired version of her taking the fight on short notice. And I think that she shows to be a little bit of a better fighter who may even take bigger steps over the next couple of fights. She's very young, 24 years old, and I could see her taking some big leaps and strides in her game, maybe a little bit more so than a Casey O'Neill. Give me Luana Santos to win a decision here, dominating the clinch, working against the cage, and then breaking off here and there, landing some shots, and just doing enough to get the judges to lean her way.
Michael Vick here at BetUS.com. Get it all. Huge bonuses, great odds, a race book, live in-game betting, and a casino. BetUS, my online sports book and casino.
You guys could definitely expect to see some excitement in the cage when these two fighters face off with each other. Joshua Culibao taking on Ricardo Ramos, fight taking place in the featherweight division. We'll kick things off talking a little bit about Ricardo Ramos, who's still only 29 years old. He's been in the UFC for some time. He had an early start to his career. He hasn't been the most active fighter over the years. He comes into this fight off 2 losses where he was submitted in the first round. All right, so a lot of question marks regarding him, but he's the type of fighter that can go out there and shake things up with his striking. He has finishing power on the feet. He's very tricky. He'll throw spinning attacks at you. He went out there and knocked out Danny Chavez in the first round. Shout out to Danny. We interviewed him on the show. Cool dude. I've kept in touch with him a little bit throughout the years. But the most notable victory that he had through his career thus far is without a doubt the Ayman Zahabi victory, where he hit him with the spinning back elbow in the 3rd round. I mean, that really showed how dangerous he can be on the feet. He also went out there and outpointed Hyung Ho Kang, who is a talented striker, and that was more of a prime version of Kang as well. So, I mean, he's not a bad fighter, but he's not nearly as good of a fighter as people thought that he could have been at times. He's an unreliable fighter. There's definitely question marks in regards to his grappling. While on the other hand, Joshua Culibao is a very well-rounded fighter, has some solid grappling skills, solid striking skills. He checks off so many boxes. He's a dog. He's willing to go to war. That there's no question about that. And you got to be backing Joshua Culibao here, in my opinion. I just think that Culibao will have moments to get this fight down to the mat and have success there. And even on the feet, I think that Culibao can avoid being caught with that wild type of knockout shot and will eventually break Ramos, or will just take advantage of him pressuring him, and just he'll be a step ahead as they go to war. He'll dig his feet into the canvas and he'll land those heavier shots. He'll impose his will. Now, Culibao comes off a decision loss to Danny Silva. It was a split decision. That's a fact there. We remember that very clearly because we had Danny Silva targeted as an underdog. We cashed in on Danny Silva there, but that was a very close fight. And Danny Silva is a fighter that I'm very high on, coming off the most exciting fight that I've ever seen on Dana White's Contender Series. Trains with Cub Swanson and them. He's a dog, and he went out there and he snuck out a split decision over Culibao. Culibao had his moments there as well. Before that, he loses to Lerone Murphy. That was a very close fight as well. Was a unanimous decision for Murphy, but Culibao could have won that fight, and Murphy's a high caliber fighter. Before that, submits Melsek Bagdasarian, who's high level. Decisioned the Sting Seungwoo Choi. Defeated Nurden Beck, had a draw with Charles Jourdain. His big notable loss that he had was where he was knocked out against Jalen Turner. That was in his UFC debut. He may have taken that fight on short notice, I forget, but still, that's a big call up to make your debut in the octagon against a talented fighter like Turner. He learned from that experience. He's 30 years old. He's starting to become primed. He's a dog, and I just think that he's a better fighter than Ricardo Ramos. I like Joshua Culibao. Like we said, he has more ways to win this fight. Keep an eye on the grappling. If Culibao looks to get this fight down to the mat and try to work either some damage down on the mat, or even if he tries to set up a submission, we have question marks in regards to Ramos's ground game, right? He's a Brazilian fighter, but he's one of the Brazilian fighters. He's a kickboxing Brazilian fighter first and foremost. He's not a fighter that has that BJJ background, that decorated BJJ background. He's more of an Alex Pereira type of Brazilian fighter with the tricky and skilled striking. Okay, so give me Joshua Culibao. He's currently a -170 on BetUS. I have no problem with anybody if they're targeting that line. I don't think it's that high at all. I like Culibao to get the job done and to get a finish. Here we got the big boys throwing down. Junior Tafa, the younger brother of Justin Tafa. You guys know Tafa gang is all about scrapping it out. I mean, these guys look to really have a street fight when they're in the cage. They're all about that life. On the other hand, you got Valter Walker, who is another part of a UFC sibling pair, and as he's the brother of Johnny Walker. He just took his first ever pro loss. He's now 11-1, had a very lackluster performance against Lucas Brzeski, was trying to implement a very heavy grappling attack in that fight, which is something that we have to take note of as he's taking on Junior Tafa, who is a fighter that has struggled with his takedown defense. Tafa is a striker first. He's a kickboxer that is trying to pick up the overall MMA game. When the fight is on the feet, he could have a lot of success in there. I mean, he has serious power. He'll impose his will there. He'll intimidate dudes. He'll knock you out, but he has to stuff the takedowns. And we saw him struggle in his UFC debut against Muhammad Usman as Usman continuously changed levels. Even though Tafa still almost got him out of there a couple times and was hitting him with some big shots, he just didn't have his feet under him and fell to his back quite a bit. And that's something that could be very annoying when you're targeting a fighter, as I know because I had official action on Junior Tafa there, and that was a frustrating fight. He was so close to getting the job done, but just didn't. And you got to understand, though, he's young, and you're going to see major strides in his takedown defense. There's no question about that. That's something that the Tafa brothers have known that they have to work on, and they are working on that aspect of their fight game. You also have to note that Junior Tafa is a fighter that fought the majority of his career, I believe, in the light heavyweight division. So he's getting his feet under him. He's settling into the heavyweight frame, which he definitely has. So he could look to put solid size on, good size. You know, doesn't want to just gain weight, but wants to get that muscle under him, and he'll really have his feet under him, his legs under him as he establishes himself in the heavyweight division. This is a tough fight, if you ask me. I'm leaning towards Junior Tafa. I think that he lands impactful strikes in this fight that kind of intimidate Valter, and Junior kind of dictates the pace a little bit. Valter's gonna shoot on him. I think that he'll telegraph some of those shots, and Junior maybe has success stuffing them and making him pay as he tries to enter there. In Walker's UFC debut, he was 4-5 on his takedowns. That's an 80% ratio. That's a solid ratio there. 7 minutes and 19 seconds of control time. I mean, he did have success with his grappling, but even then, it still wasn't enough to get the victory over the slouch of a fighter in Brzeski. No disrespect, but Brzeski's not him. And I'm going to side with Junior here. I think that Junior can get a knockout in this fight as well. I think he can land a big strike that shakes things up. And even if he doesn't find the knockout, I think that, like I said earlier, I think that he can be the bully in this fight with Valter kind of respecting him too much. And I wasn't that impressed with Valter's UFC debut. So, yes, we have concerns about the takedown defense of Junior. We have to note that one more time. If you guys are targeting Junior, expect it to be a little nerve-wracking at times as Valter shoots in, because he shows that he will continuously shoot on you. I'm gonna say that Junior has continued to sharpen up that aspect of his game, and he'll be all right there. You also have to note this. Valter Walker is going to have about a 9-inch reach advantage, which is crazy to think about. But even then, I don't care about that too much. I think Junior Tafa is just a much more polished striker and will get the better of those exchanges, even with that reach disadvantage. Not overly concerned about that. Take a look at the betting line on BetUS. This fight is essentially a pick 'em. Okay, that's what it is. Pick your poison here. Who do you think wins this fight? Are you banking on Walker to have continuous success with the takedowns and control Tafa down there and not allow Tafa to work his way back up to his feet? Or do you think that Tafa has continued to work on that takedown defense and he stuffs some of those and makes Walker pay as he tries to enter? One thing I feel very confident in is that Tafa will get the better of this fight on the feet. It's going to strictly boil down to the fact, can he keep it there? Can he stuff those takedowns? Can he make Walker pay as he tries to enter with those sloppy takedown attempts? And I'm going to give my boy Junior Tafa another chance here, even though he let me down against Muhammad Usman. He did have a nice bounce back victory after that Usman fight as he went out there and knocked out Pork Reporter. Shout out to old Porker there. And then he was finished in his last fight against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who's an underrated fighter and just a little bit of a different level of experience and whatnot. And I don't think that Valter is even shown to be on Marcos Rogerio de Lima's level. Time will tell. I side with Junior Tafa. Tafa gang. Tafa gang. Don't forget, we're doing a live fight companion for the main card. If you guys want to join me, come hop on the show and chat it up with me. We'll hang out and we'll watch a fight or two on the main card. All right, boys, we're strolling through the main card now. We have the Nightmare Carlos Prates taking on the Leech Jingliang Li. Now, Li, he comes into this fight off an emotional performance, if you ask me. Do you guys remember the card that he fought on, that UFC 279 card, which was a while ago? He since had to have some surgery on his spine. He's had a lot going on outside the cage as well, but that fight against D-Rod, everybody had him winning that fight. And I got a lot of respect for D-Rod. I think he's a very tough outing. So you got to kind of give credit to Lee for essentially winning that fight. And everyone had him winning that fight. Go check the media scores. And that was a tough night for him too, because remember, all the fighters on that fight card were all being divas about who they were going to get matched up with. There was all this switcheroo going on the main card. Remember, Nate Diaz was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev, and then Chimaev ended up fighting Kevin Holland. And Diaz fought Ferguson. It was a bunch of craziness going on. But at the end of the day, Jingliang Li, I think he may have even fought D-Rod up in weight. I forget all the details there, but you guys know what I'm talking about. He ended up getting the short end of the stick on that card. So he comes in very hungry. And Li is a fighter that really has fight-ending power in his hands, okay? If you guys kind of forgot what he's been doing when he's getting his hand raised, knocked out Muslim Salikov, knocked out Santiago Ponzinibbio, knocked out Zaleski dos Santos, knocked out David Zawada. Okay, you run through the majority of all of his recent victories. Even knocked out Zach Otto back in the day. I mean, he's knocking dudes out. If you even want to mention the Bobby Nash KO victory. Okay, that's what he does. Now, as of recently, it's been a little bit of a win-loss, if you really want to count the D-Rod fight as a loss. But, I mean, submitted by Khamzat Chimaev, undefeated stud, lost to Neil Magny. Neil Magny, a crafty veteran that goes out there and gets his hand raised. So just understand that the Leech is kind of an underrated fighter, if you ask me. And if there's one thing that's going for him here is that he has that fight-ending power in his hands. And Carlos Prates, even though he's such a dangerous fighter, and I just want to throw this in there before we even go back to that, but Prates is a fighter you have to have on your radar as one of the top up-and-coming fighters in the game. This guy moves differently. He has a different type of frame. He has that fight-ending power in all parts of his body, whether it's his knees, his elbows, his hands, his feet. This dude is dynamic, okay? But if there's one issue that I kind of have with him, although it's not that big of an issue, but I don't like the way that he looked in the beginning of that Trevin Giles fight. And I have a lot of respect for Giles, but Giles was touching him up. Okay, maybe I'll call him Giles. It's Trevin Giles or Giles before I have you guys in the comment section getting on my pronunciation there. But Trevin was getting the better of that fight before finally getting touched with the touch of death there as Prates hit him with that left straight, I believe it was, and just shut his lights out. But if you saw the live betting line on that fight, as that fight was progressing, Trevin was getting the better of that fight and was probably en route to winning a decision. He was touching Carlos up. Carlos kept hunting with those step-in knees, which he does very well. And I think that you're going to see him get a lot of finishes with those knees. I think those knees are going to continue to come up the middle, and I think you're going to see him hurting dudes to the body. and just even working the body as he sets up stuff up top. I mean, this guy's going to get all types of dynamic finishes. He really has a wild personality too. He's known for smoking a stove right before he goes into the cage. He's smoking stoves as he's entering the arena and whatnot. I mean, he's a street boy, man, and he has that type of fighting style when he's in the cage. He's very relaxed in there, and that works perfectly for him. It sets up those fight-ending shots. But here's the thing. He's a little bit too lackadaisical in there at times, and I think that's why Trevin was able to get off on him early. He's going to be looking to land those big knees up the middle. He's going to be all lackadaisical in there, looking to land those big shots, and the Leech is going to throw some terrorizing shots with his hands towards Carlos Prates' face, and I'm just a little concerned that one of those lands and we may see Prates knocked out. Okay, just want to throw that out there. We have seen Prates knocked out before. He's been knocked out once before, but the majority of his losses have come by way of submission. That's not a major threat that the Leech has going for himself there. That's a good thing for Carlos. All in all, I know I'm going everywhere with the story of this fight, but I want to be very clear. I think that Carlos Prates is one of the brightest up-and-coming fighters in the UFC. I think he's going to get a knockout victory here. I think that this is a fighter that is going to string off many knockout victories over his UFC career, and you may even find him on the list of all-time KOs in the UFC. The only issue that he has going for himself, if you want to say, is that he got into the UFC a little bit later. He's 30 years old now. I would have loved to seen him fighting in the UFC back from when he was 25, 26. They kind of found him a little bit late. And he's had his growing pains, 6 losses, but he's figuring it all out, and he is a dangerous boy when he's in there. And Jingliang Li is coming off that spine surgery. He's 36 years old. You got to side with Prates here, if you ask me. Prates opened up as a minus 255 on BetUS, came all the way down to a flat minus 200 for a little bit, and then he screams back up to a minus 245 and almost going back to where it started. So you got to keep an eye on the line movement with this fight. If you're targeting Prates, which is where I would aim you to look towards, you wanted to grab him, obviously, when he was around minus 200. Maybe if you're lucky, it'll creep back that way. People are just a little bit concerned with the Trevin fight before he found that knockout, and they're worried that Lee is going to get his hands on him in the striking exchanges. But give me Prates to land devastating knees up the middle and eventually even crack him with some heavy, long-ranged hooks and step in straight shots, just all types of wild stuff coming at Lee's way. And I think that Lee is going to really face some damage in this fight. Give me Prates on the finish. I say he gets that knockout in the first or second round, a little bit earlier on in the fight. And maybe you're targeting the under 1.5 in this fight. I think Prates finds that finish and gets the job done. Now, this will be a fun, stylistic clash in the lightweight division between the number 5 Mateusz Gamrot and the number 11th ranked Dan Hooker. Of course, Hooker being the very skilled kickboxer, Gamrot being the relentless grappler. I mean, he really pushes the pace with his grappling, just relentless chain takedown attempts coming from him when he's in the cage. That's what Hooker is going to be looking at when he's in there. Dan Hooker, though, a crafty veteran, potentially has the ability to keep this fight standing where he can get the better of the striking exchanges. It's going to be a tall task for him. Dan Hooker has been through a lot over the past half decade or more, if you want to run back to what he's been doing, man. I mean, first off, the DP fight, the Dustin Poirier match that he had, the heart that he showed in that fight was crazy, okay? And going into that loss, he was really putting in work. He was on a 3-fight winning streak. His only loss before that, as of recently, was a loss to Edson Barbosa. But in the mix of that Barbosa loss, he was 7 of 8, all right? So he won 7 of his 8 fights with the loss coming by way of Barbosa, which led him up to that DP fight. So he was really hitting on all cylinders. He was on fire. And I would still say, even though he came up short against DP, that was a phenomenal performance. I mean, he's just such a dog. He had his moments in that fight too. He hurt DP at times. That was a 5-round fight, a 5-round main event fight where there's no question that Hooker lost a little bit of himself in that fight. I really believe that. He was knocked out in his next fight in the first round against Michael Chandler. That was an official play of ours that we targeted. Just want to mention that because that was a fun one. I've been big on Chandler from his Bellator days, and we targeted him right in his UFC debut. He went out there and he slept Hooker in the first round. And I do think that Hooker wasn't the prime version of himself after everything he left in the cage against DP, but he did bounce back with the victory over Nasrat Haqparast. And I also want to mention his last two victories that he had after that too, the Claudio Puelles and the Jalen Turner fight, they were like vintage performances from Hooker. He really rewinded the clock and he's starting to look like himself once again. I think that maybe he knocked out some of the cobwebs of the damage that he took. Yes, he did lose to Islam Makhachev and Arnold Allen, was finished in both of them, but got subbed by Islam in the first round, big deal. And Arnold Allen, he did get caught in the first round. Allen's a tough outing and he was lacking a little bit in that fight, but all in all, I do believe that Dan Hooker has rewinded the clock a little bit. He's 34. I think he has a little bit left to give the fight game. He's cut from a different cloth. We know that. He's built differently. I really think there's no question about that. And he's a cool dude. I know he's getting a lot of ink done recently. He's all tatted up. Looks like he's eating good too, man. That plate has me hungry. And I'm very excited for this fight. I think there is an avenue for victory for Dan Hooker, and it's obviously stuff the takedowns, work the calf kicks, work his hands at range and outpoint Gamrot. But I'm going to give it to you guys straight. I think that Gamrot's pressure is going to be too much. I think it's going to be too much, and I think that Gamrot could even have the occasional success on the feet because Hooker will be so worried about those takedown attempts that Gamrot will be able to kind of trick him and go up high and land some shots here and there. And I'm on Mateusz Gamrot. I just think that this dude is... He's a little bit something else for this division. He's one of the higher caliber grapplers in this division. Stud athlete, great cardio, and without going on too much about this fight, I think I'll just make it clear. I think the grappling and the pace of Gamrot will be enough to edge out a victory over Dan Hooker. Although Hooker has potential in this fight, but you got to back Gamrot here. Gamrot is a minus 250. He opened up as a minus 210. That line has me scratching my head a little bit, especially if it continues to trend that way. If Gamrot touches the 300 range, the bounce back that you would be able to get on Hooker, he's a plus 200 right now. I mean, if you were able to grab Dan Hooker at plus 250, something like that, I mean, I think that there's some serious value on Dan Hooker as the underdog in this fight. So I'm not really in agreement with the line. I'm not. If Gamrot struggles with those takedowns, it's gonna be a problem if this fight goes to the judges' scorecards. The crowd's going to be rooting on Dan Hooker. There's some serious things that you have to worry about. The judges' criteria is all about damage. If Hooker has some crucial moments where he opens up Gamrot with the cut, lands a couple big strikes, he's solidifying rounds. And Gamrot's style is not the most suitable for the judges' scorecards these days, although he does it really well. And it's just that pace is going to be a lot to deal with. So I do have Gamrot winning a decision here, but keep an eye on the Hangman for some value on him. See where that line touches. Get the shoes out. Get those shoeies ready to go. Tuivasa stepping back into the cage, taking out Jairzinho, Rozenstruik. Tuivasa still ranked in the top 10, even though he comes into this fight on a 4-fight losing skid. He's getting finished up by everybody that he steps in there with. Got knocked out by Cyril Gahn. Pavlovich got submitted by Volkov, submitted by Tybura. He's getting knocked out. He's getting subbed. He's fighting with the heavy heart when he's in the cage. There's no question about that. This dude is really hungry to bounce back with a victory. I have no question about that. Part of the problem is that he's fighting very high level opposition when he's in there. Another issue that he has, in my opinion, is his cardio and his conditioning. He doesn't take very good care of himself. I don't care how much he's posting pictures and videos of himself putting in work in the gym and training or lifting weights and whatnot. You see it in his body. And the fact that he's willing to grab a stranger's shoe and pour beer in it and chug it, I think that says a lot about him, man. All right. So I'm all about that wild stuff, especially when I was younger, man. I'm all about that wild stuff when it comes to drinking, but you will never, ever get me to pour beer in a stranger's shoe and drink it. I think it's just absolutely grotesque. I don't know what the deal with that is. If anybody wants to shed some light on that situation, what's up with you guys down under, man? Is that like a thing out there, man? And again, I'm not like a clean cut type of dude, man. Trust me on when I say that, man. When it comes to me with my American style, we do some crazy stuff too, but why are you drinking dudes' shoes too? Guys' shoes. Okay, if it's one thing, even if it's a girl shoe, it's pretty gross, man. And listen, I love me some alcohol too, as you guys know that catch up with me on my fight companion. But when you drink, you will have some severe consequences with your conditioning and whatnot. And I think that's a problem for him. Jairzinho Rozenstruik has shown to be a very explosive striker. He's very dangerous early on, but he's also showing signs of looking good later in fights. I mean, he broke down Shamil Gaziev in the 4th round. He broke him down as that fight progressed, and Gaziev just looked good in his bounce back fight. That was a big victory there. Then you want to talk about losing to high level fighters. Look at the people that are defeating Rozenstruik. It's the best of the best. Alexander Volkov, Curtis Blades, Cyril Gane. We'll mention Jailton Almeida there too. That was just kind of a stylistic problem there, as Almeida's a high caliber grappler. That's not going to be the case with Tai Tuivasa. This is a perfect stylistic clash for Rozenstruik. It's going to be a striker versus striker matchup. And I think that Rozenstruik will be the fighter that's looking better as the fight goes on. Let me also mention another one of his notable losses against Francis Ngannou. They went to war for 20 seconds and he got hit with a big shot. Now listen, even though he got caught by Francis Ngannou, do note Rozenstruik is not an easy fighter to touch. He's only been getting landed on at 2.78 strikes per minute. Tai Tuivasa is there to be hit much more. All right, he's been absorbing 5.05 strikes per minute on the feet. I think that Rozenstruik's going to have a much easier time finding Tai Tuivasa. He's going to be landing the cleaner shots. Tai Tuivasa will be dangerous as the fight goes on. He will be dangerous, but as the fight progresses, he will start to wilt a little bit more so. And even if we see that fight-ending strike, I still have to bank on Rozenstruik being the fighter that lands that big shot that hurts Tai Tuivasa and crumbles him up in a ball or even flatlines him. And just to kind of also shed some light on Tai Tuivasa's losses over the years, we already talked about the Pavlovich and Gane fight. I was there live for the Sergey Pavlovich fight. Okay, the crowd was completely shocked. Everybody was quiet. You could have heard a pin drop in the arena. It was crazy. Everybody was so hyped up with Tai coming out to the fun music and all that, and then you just see this mammoth Russian go out there and just put an onslaught on him. It was crazy. Okay, I could see something similar happening here. I could see Rozenstruik putting it on him and finishing him up there. So I'm on Jairzinho Rozenstruik to get a finish in this fight. I am. Tai Tuivasa moves well for his size and whatnot. He's a dangerous striker, but I like Rozenstruik here. Tai Tuivasa opened up as a plus 130. He's now a plus 160. So we do note that action is coming on Rozenstruik. He's currently a minus 190, opened up as a minus 160. So the action's coming on Rozenstruik as to be expected as far as I'm concerned. I think he's the better fighter that's hitting on all cylinders right now. It's going to be really tough to see Tai lose another fight. That would put him on a 5-fight losing skid. I don't think the UFC would cut him, but he'd bounce off the rankings, and hopefully the UFC would give him a more winnable fight. That's what I would hope for Tai Tuivasa there. I mean, they just continue to feed him to the wolves. He's never going to be a fighter that's a heavyweight champion. He's never going to fight for the belt, even at this point, in my opinion. Give him winnable fights. Let him put on a show for the fans. Let him get some knockouts. Give him some lower level fights, man. I don't know what the UFC is doing there. Listen up, guys. For whatever reason, the audio for this co-main event, and just only the co-main event, it'll be back to normal right when we get to the Izzy versus Du Plessis fight. But for whatever reason, this little snippet on the co-main event gave me absolute hell. Okay, I'm tired. It's late Saturday night, very late, Sunday morning, essentially. And I got a full belly of chocolate chip cookies and whole milk, and I should have never did it. I'm having some regret right now, guys. But just bear with me because it's a very quick breakdown, and like I said, the audio will be good to go for the rest of the video. It's only like this for like 3 minutes, guys, and I sound kind of cool if you think about it. I kind of sound robotic or whatnot, so listen up. Teller is here. To the co-main event of the evening. You guys know I love me some flyweight action, but I'll be honest with you guys, this fight doesn't do it for me, at least as far as where it's at on the card as a co-main event. I would have liked to have seen a more solid co-main event slot here. It is what it is, though. Kai Kara France taking on Steve Erceg. Erceg just came up short in a title shot against the very well-rounded Alexander Pantoja. That fight kind of came down to the 5th round, right? I mean, Erceg shot a takedown, didn't have success with that, and that could have been the difference in the fight. It was a very close fight. Erceg looked good. He did show that he's a very high-caliber fighter. All right, up into that attempt, he was 3-0 in the UFC, made a quick buzz as soon as he came into the UFC. It was a knockout over Matt Schnell that really put him on the map, where we're seeing that he's not just a high-caliber grappler, but he's a very well-rounded fighter. I think he is the more complete fighter here. Kai Kara France, the more technical striker, but I like the size advantage that Erceg has here, and like I said, he's a more well-rounded fighter. I think Erceg has more tools that he could use to get the job done. France is coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing skid. Losing to good fighters, though. He lost to Amir Albazi via split decision and then lost to Brandon Moreno. Before that, he was knocked out in the third. Before that, when he was putting in some work. Respectable losses that he's taken, all right, over the years. It was another loss to Brandon Moreno, a loss to Brandon Royval. Other than that, he's been going in there handling business. But I think Steve Erceg may be a similar name to the names that we strung off as far as the losses for France. Just a high caliber fighter that's a little bit of a step above him, has more tools in the arsenal. I'm not going to go on too much about this fight here. I like Steve Erceg to win. And I think the question is, does he find a submission potentially? Does France put himself in a vulnerable position where Erceg can maybe capitalize and get a finish? I'm going to say Erceg wins a decision. I'm going to actually say that Kaikar France is able to keep his consciousness and not put himself in too much of a vulnerable position. I'm going to say Erceg just has more tools, changes levels, mixes things up, and is a step above. And I'll save my voice for this main event because I'm excited to talk about this main event in a second. But real quick, Erceg opened up as a -210. He's now -225. Action coming in on Erceg. Is there any value on the line where it's at? I think you want to grab it, obviously, your -210. I mean, I think you're starting to reach at 225. Hey, guys, Teller, just got a quick announcement for you guys. If you can, please go follow me on my social media. I'm creeping up on that 10K mark on Instagram. Subscribe here on the channel, too, if you can. I'm creeping up on that 10K subscriber count on YouTube. It really means the world to me. And if you guys want to work with me for my official plays, reach out to me. I'll give you some further details there as well. Thank you, guys. Here we go. We got the main event set to take place. The UFC middleweight championship of the world is on the line. We got bad blood brewing. Dricus Du Plessis is taking on Israel Adesanya. Now, Du Plessis, controversial victory in his last fight over Sean Strickland. A lot of people thought that Strickland won that fight. One thing that you cannot doubt is that Du Plessis is an absolute dog. In fact, I would say it looked like he wanted that fight a little bit more than Strickland. Even though I thought Strickland may have took the fight, you gotta love the way that Du Plessis finished that fight. He was just pressing forward, was willing to engage. This guy does not shy away from going to war, has big time power. His overall game is rounding out. I think he is a problem. Okay, I'm letting you guys know that right now. Now, on the other hand, Israel Adesanya comes off a performance against Sean Strickland where he was very gun shy. Right, he got tagged early and wanted nothing to do with participating in an actual fight. All right, as that fight progressed, he was on the back foot, and that's something that we've seen from Israel Adesanya a lot throughout his career, as far as him being a counter striker, and that's led to some boring matchups before. When you think about the Yoel Romero fight, I would even argue the Sean Strickland fight was a boring one. There's a couple more we could list, but one thing. We'll throw the Jared Cannonier fight in there as well. That's one for sure we'll throw in there. But one thing we have seen from Israel Adesanya is that when he has a fighter that's facing off across him, that's an aggressor that looks to bring the fight, that has led to some of the best performances that Adesanya has ever had. He's an excellent counter striker, and Du Plessis is going to be aggressing towards him in this fight. So Adesanya will be live to land that counter strike, but I will say this. I think that mentally, Du Plessis is going to be hitting on a different level here. I think that Adesanya, since the knockout loss that he took against Alex Pereira, you could say since those knockout losses that he's taken, if you want to date back to the kickboxing knockout losses he took way back in the day, but specifically that last knockout loss that he had where he lost the belt to Pereira, I do feel that fight messed with his psyche. I understand that he bounced back with the victory over Alex Pereira. That was that counter KO shot that he hit against the cage, but he was backpedaling, man. He was hurt in that fight, and I give him credit for landing that counter shot, man, but I really feel if he didn't land that zappy counter, he was en route to wilting in that fight. I'm just being honest with you guys. I think that he knows that his chin is diminished a little bit. And I like, even when Sean Strickland tagged him there, the way he was wobbled up and didn't want to participate in a war or in a fight, I think that could be an issue here because Dricus is going to be marching forward throughout this entire fight, looking to damage him. And if Israel doesn't find those sniper counter strikes, I don't know if he's going to be able to outpoint him because Du Plessis is relentless. Another factor that Du Plessis has is that his grappling is getting better and better. And I do expect that Du Plessis will get the better of the grappling exchanges. And I actually think that Du Plessis will put Stylebender on his back in this fight at some points in time. I really do. I think it'll be similar to what we saw in the Jan Blachowicz fight. I know Blachowicz was a light heavyweight fighter and Adesanya was going up and whatnot, but Du Plessis is a massive middleweight fighter. He's almost a light heavyweight fighter, and I just think that he will get a hold of Adesanya at times and put him on his back. I mean, we'll see how that plays out for the longevity of the fight, but that's another thing that Du Plessis has going for him. The chin is a lot more fresh for Du Plessis, so as they engage in the striking exchanges, I think Du Plessis can eat some of Izzy's shots to eventually hurt him and wilt him. Guys, I'm showing my cards, man. I'm leaning towards Du Plessis to get this victory here. I think he has a lot more things going for him. I think he has the mental edge as well. He's just more confident. I think that there's a lot of pressure on Adesanya's shoulders after he just lost the belt to Strickland. He wants to come back. He wants to bounce back with the victory. He questions his chin. The whole thing with the representing of Africa, as Du Plessis represents the continent, and Adesanya, that he has the continent tatted on his body there. I mean, he was born there. He moved when he was young, but of course he has pride from where his family's from. I completely understand that. I can relate to that in a lot of ways. I'm very prideful where my family comes from. I'm a third generation American, but I still have roots where my family's from. I completely get it. Okay, but it's a tricky situation, right? Du Plessis represents Africa, man, and that annoys Adesanya. And when he goes out there and finishes Adesanya and brings that belt back home to the continent of Africa and looks to really elevate the sport over there, it's gonna bother Adesanya. So Adesanya is coming in with a heavy heart in multiple ways here. And I think that Du Plessis is just going to be hitting on another level here, guys. I really do. We're going to get to the betting line in a second, but I'm going to let you guys know right now. I think that Du Plessis is going to finish Israel Adesanya. Unless Israel Adesanya completely circles and runs away throughout this fight, I want to have that set as well, right? So if Du Plessis doesn't find the finish here, it's going to be if Adesanya is on the back foot running away for extended periods of time. So then I have a little bit of a getaway there. But if Adesanya engages even in the least bit, man, and looks to hit his own counter, yeah, he's live for his own counter, but it's Du Plessis that I think is going to land that power strike. The dude has boulders for fist, and he's awkward. He's herky-jerky. They come from weird angles, and when he touches Israel Adesanya, I think the weather that Adesanya is going to wilt. All right, so I think the man's man, Du Plessis, is going to be the fighter who prevails here. And Adesanya, he'll be licking his wounds. Hopefully, his manicure doesn't get messed up and whatnot. And I know some of you guys, it annoys some of you guys. And I'm sorry for all you Adesanya fans or for you new age fans, for you youngsters. But us 90 babies are a little different. We grew up in different times, and it's okay, guys. You guys are from a different era. But I hope I didn't ruffle your guys' feathers there. I don't want to upset any of you guys, especially for you guys that hung around with me throughout this whole video. Give me Dricus Du Plessis to win this fight. The dog value is all day on Du Plessis. You could have got him at plus 130 just 5 days ago. He's still at even odds right now. The value is definitely still on him. I like Du Plessis to win this fight, even as high. I have him capped at like a minus 140, minus 150 favorite. For real, that when I'm breaking down tape, weighing out all the factors, and I have a lot of respect for the fighting ability of Adesanya. I know how good he is, and I know how he rises to the occasion at times. But when you break it all down, this screams Du Plessis defending his belt here. Okay, so that's how I see this fight. Please comment below. Let me know what you guys think about this fight. I want to know what your thoughts are on this main event bout. Obviously, this is the most exciting fight on the card. It's a great matchup. It's a close matchup. What do you guys think? Let me know where I was wrong and what you got.
This video is brought to you by BETUS Sportsbook and Casino.
All right, that brings us to the end of this video. Got to leave you guys with some closing thoughts, but real quick, thank you so much for those of you guys that like this video, that are subscribed to the channel. Follow me on my social media. If you're joining me for the Fight Companions, can't wait to hang out with you guys as we watch the main card for this event. Appreciate you guys so much. I'll leave you with some parting words. I was kind of teasing a little bit about the new generation, right? All the Izzy fans and the different type of way some of those new generation fans are and youngsters are. I try to leave you with some wisdom from an old timer. I'm creeping up to become an old timer here, even though I still got some youth left in me, but I'll leave you with this wisdom. You may have heard it from your old man before, or maybe some of you guys never heard it, so I'll try to preach it to you. It's true. I promise you guys. If you heard this before, remember, when it comes to like your circle, man, when you're in your teens and your early 20s and whatnot, I mean, I lived this life, man. I thought my friends were my family. I promise you guys, that circle you have of friends the vast majority of them will wilt and disintegrate, okay, and in a variety of ways. But when you think that you're so close to them and you're thinking, you're willing to sacrifice yourself in certain ways for them, make sure that they're your real friends, because you will have a couple of them out of your big pack. Two of my best friends are from way back in the day, part of my original crew that I had growing up. All the rest of them, they died. Some of them put themselves in positions to be in that situation, God rest their souls, but some of them died. They went to prison. Even when some of them got out of prison, they changed. We had nothing in common. I mean, they went their own route. And just understand when you're putting yourself in vulnerable situations for your friends and whatnot, make sure they're your real friends, because I promise you, you're going to lose the vast majority of those friends. I'm not saying don't have a good time and be true to your friends and whatnot, but just understand, have more of an importance to your family and whatnot, and to those real tight friends that you got that are true and that prove to be true. All right, I'll leave you guys with that for all you youngsters out there. All right, now go get your nails done. Signing out. Teller.
The teller. The teller. The teller.